Grandpa and Grandma were here again. I crossed my arms and sat obediently as Mom and Dad droned on and on about lots of things I didn't care about or understand. I just wanted to get out of there, but they always told me I needed to spend time with Grandpa and Grandma. My sister looked really bored too, and I could see her starting to nod off at times. Finally, after what had to have been days of sitting on the floor, my palm getting numb from the weight of my chin, and my elbow digging into the carpet, becoming so itchy it hurt, Mom finally said we could go play. Annoyed that she had made me stay this long, I didn't even look at her as I made my way out of the living room and up the stairs to the second floor. I passed the painting on the wall in the hallway, at the end of which was my room. I didn't know why Dad hadn't taken it down. Surely he disliked it just as much as my sister and I did. I usually tried not to look at it, as it sometimes gave me nightmares, but there were times, like this one, when I couldn't resist a quick glance. My stature of just under 5 feet forced me to gaze upward at the looming, oak-framed canvas, making it even more intimidating. The picture was of a house, the same one I lived in now, only it was full, overflowing with people. They weren't normal people either. There was something off about them, but I could never make myself tall enough to see what it was, and this time I realized I didn't want to. I scurried into my room and closed the door just enough so as to block out the painting. A few hours passed and we had supper. I could tell by the fake smiles on Mom and Dad's faces that they weren't happy about something. It was probably another argument with Grandpa and Grandma. They did that a lot when they were around each other. I wished they'd stop meeting, but they said they came over for me and my sister. If that were true, I should think they'd spend some time with us instead of yelling about whatever they yelled about in the living room. At least, though, they weren't arguing now, and I could eat my potatoes in peace. About 5 minutes into supper, Grandpa made a remark about Mom's decorating and her poor choices in artwork. I thought he must be referring to the creepy painting, and I had to agree, although I said nothing. However, Grandpa's remark put Dad on the defensive, and within the next minute, all 4 of them were yelling their lungs out, and I was cowering in my chair. I looked at my sister for some kind of guidance, but she was crying. It wasn't long until I'd had enough, and I hopped out of my chair, running upstairs completely unnoticed. As I stalked along the hallway to my room, I heard glass shatter downstairs and I quickened my pace. I slowed slightly at the painting, which glared down at me, all of the faces laughing at the tumultuous family I had to endure. I turned from it in disgust, wishing I could have a happy family like the ones on TV, or better yet, no family. Just me and my sister, happily playing together without adults screaming at each other in the background. I sat down in my closet, closed the door, and dwelled on my sorrow, silent tears falling on my collection of shoes in the darkness. When at last the yelling had ceased, and the light leaking out of my closet door began to fade with the setting of the sun, I decided it was time to emerge from my refuge and see if things were all right downstairs. I opened the door and made my way out into the hallway to find the house deathly quiet. Usually my sister would be humming or something, but not now. The strange faces in the painting smiled eerily at me as I passed them in silence. I went downstairs, first to the kitchen. One of Mom's water glasses was lying in many pieces all over the floor, so I, barefoot, dared not venture past the doorway. I didn't need to anyway. The kitchen was empty. I went to the living room. It too was empty, the only sound coming from the ticking of the clock. Where was everyone? Had my sister cut her foot on the glass? Maybe they took her to the doctor. I passed a couple of rooms, peering inside them to find them empty. As I proceeded toward the garage, I opened the door and found the car still parked inside. Had they taken Grandpa's car? They certainly weren't in the house. A quick glance through the living room window told me they hadn't taken a car, wherever they'd gone. Fear set in. Why would they leave the house and me without a car? Had they gone on a walk? Was something really wrong? I sat down on the living room carpet, suddenly wishing they were standing around me arguing with each other. It would be better than them being gone and me being alone. It felt worse than when I had been lost in a corn maze a year previously, separated from my dad. What should I do? Wait for them to come back? I suppose that was a good idea. After all, they were bound to come back. So, I sat on the couch, staring absent-mindedly down the first-floor hallway which led to the garage, and at the laundry room on the left of the hall where I liked to hide Sister's dolls. I waited for what seemed like hours while the sun set and crickets began chirping outside. All was silent. No one came home. Fear set in once again. Why hadn't they come back? I glanced at the clock on the wall. In actuality, it had been about 45 minutes, but they'd never left me alone at home for so long. In desperation, I called for Dad, and then I called for Mom. I received no answer. It was then that I realized how dark it was, and I switched on a lamp. The moment the bulb came to life, so did an idea in my head. This was just what I'd wished for, some time alone. They'd been gone for a while, so maybe they'd even be gone until morning. Many mischievous thoughts came into my mind, but the foremost of them was ice cream. I could eat twice as much as I was usually allowed to. I hopped up excitedly and ran to the kitchen. I stopped short at the doorway, though. There was still shattered glass all over the floor. I'd have to get my shoes from my closet. My spirit undimmed, I ran up the stairs, 3 steps at a time, and zoomed into my room, slipping on my tennis shoes. I went back out into the hallway, this time determined not to let my eyes meet the painting, and passed right by it without looking. Entering the kitchen, I pushed a chair up against the refrigerator and opened the freezer door. I grabbed the carton of chocolate ice cream and a spoon from the utensil drawer before going back to the living room, closing the blinds lest someone see what I was doing, and began eating the cold cream voraciously. 1, 2, 3 more bites past what I was allowed to eat. It felt great, and then terror gripped my heart. Knock, knock, knock. My gaze shifted sideways to the front door, the spoon in my small fingers falling into the ice cream container. They were home. I scrambled to hide the container behind the couch and waited for Dad to unlock the door and come in. What would I say? How would I get the ice cream back to the freezer without being seen? I waited, a permanent look of worry on my face, but Dad did not come through the door. Minutes passed. Why hadn't they come in? Suspiciously, I went to the door. Should I open it? What if it wasn't Dad? I wasn't supposed to open the door. Dad had a key. He could get in if he wanted, and if he was home, he'd come in when he was good and ready. Assuring myself of those facts, I went back to the couch, grabbed the melting ice cream, and rushed it into the kitchen. Once I had stuffed it back into the freezer, deposited my spoon in the sink, and moved the chair back to its original position, I was going to go back to my room when I heard the sound again. Knock, knock. What if Dad had lost his keys? What if it was Grandpa or Grandma? I just had to open the door. I proceeded slowly toward it, horrified at what it could mean if it wasn't a family member, and, screwing up as much courage as possible, unlocked it. I opened the door wide and received a waft of cool air instead of a greeting of any kind. There was no one outside. There were a few lights on in the houses across the street, but all was quiet, and there was no one knocking on my door. Petrified, I stared out into the moonlit street, half expectant of some occurrence, and half terrified that there was nothing between me and the darkness. Without another thought, I slammed the door shut and locked it. What was going on? Had I imagined the knocking? Maybe it had been my conscience. The sudden fear of turning into a donkey for the crime of too much ice cream seized me, and I ran up the stairs, headed toward my room. The painting stopped me. It was somehow more disturbing than when I had last seen it, a physical representation of my fears and confusedness. I didn't want freedom now. I just wanted my family back, and I wanted the hideous faces in the painting to stop staring at me. I went to my room and slammed the door. What was I to do? I could call the police, but what if I called them and Mom and Dad came back a minute later? I would be in so much trouble, and they might start yelling again. I mindlessly started rolling a toy car around on the floor as I pondered my predicament. Maybe I had fallen asleep in the closet, and this was a nightmare. It certainly seemed like one. Most usually started off happily enough before they became terrifying. After that, I would just wake up and call for Mom. Those were some of the times when she was really nice. I wanted to wake up. How could I make myself wake up, though? I tried pinching myself to no avail. If I was dreaming, I couldn't wake myself up, and so I resigned myself to my terrifying existence on a night with no parents. Perhaps they really would be back in the morning. I'd just go to sleep and hope. I hopped onto my bed, leaving the lights on to keep away my fears, and tried to close my eyes and rest. Knock, 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 knock. The sound came from downstairs, and I sat bolt upright. Where was the sound coming from, and what time was it? Sunlight was filtering through my window. I must have slept all night. Was the knocking coming from pans as Mom and Grandma made breakfast? Had they returned? Or was it the same phantasmal sound I'd heard last night in the dream, if it was a dream? I slipped out of bed, my shoes still on, and went into the hall. The faces stared at me from the painting, still eerily malevolent, but somehow looking even more emaciated. Thinking about it with those big words somehow made it even worse. When I came downstairs, I found that breakfast was not being made, and everything was exactly as I had left it. No one was home. I was still totally alone. I leaned against the front door, all of my fear about to climax when I heard it again. Knock, knock. I spun around, staring at the door not because I thought someone was standing behind it, but because the knocking had not come from the front door. The back door? I raced through the kitchen and into the mudroom. I opened the door expectantly, but found no one there. It was stupid, but on impulse I had to do what I did next. I ran out the door and jogged a full circle around the house, stopping when I again reached the back door, panting. Absolutely no one was there. I was startled, though, when a voice a few feet from me asked me if I was all right. I looked up to find my middle-aged neighbor and his wife, the green thumbs of the street, looking at me with worried expressions on their faces. Without answering their questions and glad to see people, I asked them if they'd seen my parents. They replied that they hadn't, and offered to call them for me. I said that I would be thankful if they did, but as my neighbor's wife went into their house for a phone, I heard the familiar knock, knock, knock from within mine. Without another word to my neighbor, I ran back inside, through the kitchen, and into the living room. I had a strange notion in my head that my family was in the house, but hiding from me. I yelled for them to come out and stop hiding, fear mounting in my voice. I was going to break down soon. No reply came except for another knock from down the hall near the garage. I cried for them to tell me where they were, and I tore open the garage door. It was empty save for the car. I called for Mom, knock, 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 from the laundry room behind me. I backed up and flipped on the light. I called for them to tell me where they were, knock, 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 from behind the walls. My little terrified mind couldn't comprehend it. I asked my family why they weren't showing themselves and sprinted into the garage for a hammer. Why were they hiding in the walls? Why? Back to the laundry room, hammer in hand. Knock, 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 knock. I plunged the blade end of the hammer into the wall and began ripping off sheetrock as quickly as I could. When at last a sizable hole was made, I crawled onto the washing machine so that my face was level with the hole. Knock from right next to the hole I'd made. I ripped the hole there, and a skeletal hand, my father's wedding ring glimmering on its finger, fell out along with a couple of rats which had to have been knocking it against the inside of the wall as they... I screamed and fell off the washer. I didn't believe it. I ran from the laundry room, my vision blurred by terror, and up the stairs to the second floor. I stopped at the painting just long enough to see the faces of my family, emaciated and decaying, among the multitude of others in the horrifying painting. I grabbed the frame and ripped the whole thing off the wall to reveal a huge hole. A skeleton in Grandma's clothes fell out onto the hallway floor. I dropped the painting and ran to my room. Every face on the painting turned to face me as I slammed the door.